I never thought I'd be the kind of woman to set a trap for my own family. But life has a way of pushing you to places you never imagined. My name is Margaret, and at 68, I've seen enough to know that love and loyalty can twist into something dark when you're not looking. Started 2 years ago, when my son, Daniel, brought his new wife, Claire, into our lives. She was all charm at first, bright smiles, quick laughs, and a knack for making you feel like you were the only person in the room. I welcomed her, opened my home, my heart. Daniel was happy, and that was enough. But happiness, I learned, can be a fragile thing, and Claire was the crack that would shatter it. The first time it happened, I was recovering from a bad flu. I'd been bedridden for days, my body heavy with fever, my mind foggy. Daniel was away on a business trip, and Claire had insisted on staying to take care of me. I was grateful, or at least I thought I was. That afternoon, as I sipped weak tea she'd brought me, I heard a crash from the kitchen. My heart lurched. I dragged myself out of bed, legs trembling, and found Claire sprawled on the floor, her eyes fluttering like a damsel in a bad movie. "Margaret," she gasped. I just got so overwhelmed, taking care of you." I knelt beside her, guilt washing over me. I apologized, promised to get better soon, to be less of a burden. She smiled weakly, and I believed her. It happened again a few months later. Another illness, a chest infection that left me coughing until my ribs ached. Daniel was home this time, and when Claire collapsed in the living room, clutching her chest, he rushed to her side, his face pale with worry. I watched from the doorway, my own sickness forgotten, as he cradled her, whispering reassurances. She recovered quickly. Of course, always did. But each time, the pattern grew clearer. Every time I got sick, Claire would stage her little performance, and Daniel would pour his attention into her, leaving me to fend for myself. I started to wonder if it was coincidence or something more sinister. By the third time, I wasn't just wondering, I was suspicious. My health had been declining. Nothing major, just the slow grind of age mixed with bad luck. A stomach bug, a bout of bronchitis, a lingering cold. And every time, like clockwork, Claire would faint or collapse, stealing the spotlight. Daniel, my sweet, loyal boy, was torn, but Claire's dramatics always won. I saw the strain in his eyes, the way he looked at me with guilt, as if he were failing me. I wanted to scream, to tell him it wasn't his fault, but I had no proof. Just a gnawing feeling in my gut that Claire was playing a game I didn't understand. I started paying attention. Little things at first, how she'd glance at me before her episodes, as if checking to see if I was watching. How her collapses were always perfectly timed, always in view. I tried talking to Daniel once, gently, over coffee. "Do you think Claire might be struggling?" I asked, choosing my words carefully. His face hardened. "Mom, she's doing her best. She's under a lot of stress, taking care of you." The words stung, but I didn't push. I couldn't bear the thought of driving a wedge between us. So I stayed quiet, and I watched. The turning point came last spring. I caught pneumonia, the worst I'd ever felt. My breaths were shallow, my body weak. Claire was there, as always, playing the dutiful daughter-in-law. But this time, her collapse was different. She fell in the hallway, right outside my bedroom, her body crumpling in a way that looked too perfect, too staged. I watched through the crack in my door, my heart pounding. She lay there for a moment, then glanced up, her eyes meeting mine for a split second before she closed them again. That look, it wasn't fear or pain. It was calculation. I didn't sleep that night. My mind churned, piecing together the fragments of her behavior. The way she'd linger near my medications, asking questions about my symptoms. The way she'd sigh dramatically when Daniel wasn't around, muttering about how exhausting it was to care for me. I started to wonder if my illnesses weren't just bad luck. The thought was monstrous, but once it took root, it wouldn't let go. Was Claire making me sick? Was she poisoning me, bit by bit, to keep me weak, to keep Daniel's attention on her? I had no proof, only suspicion, and it was eating me alive. I decided to test her. The next time I felt a cold coming on, I didn't tell anyone. I hid my symptoms, forced myself to act normal. Sure enough, Claire didn't collapse. No dramatics, no fainting spells. It was the first time in months I'd been sick without her stealing the show. That's when I knew. This wasn't about her being overwhelmed. This was about control. About keeping me small, weak, dependent. About making sure Daniel's loyalty stayed with her, not me. The realization burned, hot and bitter. I loved my son, but I wasn't going to let his wife destroy me. I needed proof. I couldn't just accuse her. Daniel would never believe me without evidence. So I bought a small security camera, the kind you can hide in a corner. I told myself it was just to catch her faking, to show Daniel the truth. But deep down, I was scared of what I might find. I set it up in the living room, tucked behind a photo frame, its tiny lens trained on the space where Claire liked to stage her collapses. I waited, my heart heavy with dread and hope. Dread that I was right, hope that I was wrong. The next time I got sick, a sinus infection that left me dizzy and aching, I let Claire know. I played the part, coughing weakly, asking for her help. She was all sympathy, bringing me soup, fluffing my pillows. But I saw the glint in her eyes, the way her lips twitched when she thought I wasn't looking. That night, as I lay in bed, I heard the familiar thud from downstairs. My heart raced. I checked the camera feed on my phone, my hands shaking. There she was, sprawled on the floor, her performance flawless. But this time, I had her on tape. The truth was mine, and it was about to explode. Watching that footage felt like staring into a mirror that showed me a version of my family I didn't want to see. Claire's collapse was perfect, her body limp, her face contorted in just the right amount of distress. But the camera caught what I'd suspected, the moment before she fell. She glanced around, checking her stage. No one was there. Not yet. But she knew Daniel would come running when he heard the crash. And he did. My son burst into the frame, his face a mask of panic, dropping to his knees beside her. He didn't see her lips curl, just for a second, into a satisfied smirk. But I did. The camera did. I played the video over and over, my stomach churning. Each time, that smirk cut deeper. It wasn't just about faking her collapses anymore. It was about power, about manipulating my son, about keeping me on the sidelines of his life. I wanted to march downstairs and shove the phone in her face, demand answers. But I didn't. Anger like that burns hot, but it's reckless. I needed to be smart. If I was going to confront Claire, I had to be sure. Not just about the faking, but about the bigger question, was she making me sick? The idea felt insane at first. Poison. In my own home. But the more I thought about it, the more it made sense. My illnesses had started not long after Claire moved in. They came too often. Too conveniently. I'd always been healthy before. Strong for my age. Now, I was tired all the time. My body betraying me in ways it never had. I started cataloging my symptoms in a notebook, hidden under my mattress. Dates, foods I ate, medicines I took. Claire was always there, hovering, offering tea, soup, pills. I trusted her. But trust, I was learning, could be a dangerous thing. I decided to dig deeper. I went to the doctor, quietly, without telling anyone. I asked for blood tests, anything that might show if something was wrong beyond the usual ailments of age. The results came back normal. Mostly. But there was a slight elevation in my liver enzymes. Nothing alarming, the doctor said, but enough to make me pause. I didn't know much about toxicology, but I'd watched enough crime shows to know that some poisons don't show up easily. I needed more than a hunch. I needed evidence. The camera became my ally. I bought 2 more, small and discreet, and placed them in the kitchen and my bedroom. I felt like a spy in my own home, but I had no choice. If Claire was tampering with my food or medicine, catch her. I started being careful, eating only what I prepared myself, drinking bottled water I kept in my room. My symptoms eased, but I didn't let on. I played the part of the frail mother-in-law, letting Claire think she was still in control. One evening, as I sat in my armchair pretending to nap, I watched her through half-closed eyes. She was in the kitchen, making tea. The camera's tiny red light blinked from its hiding spot in a potted plant. She hummed softly, her movements casual, but I saw her pause over my cup, her hand lingering longer than it should. My heart pounded, but I stayed still, my face slack. She brought the tea to me, her smile as warm as ever. Here, Margaret, this'll help your throat. I took the cup, murmured thanks, and set it down untouched. Later, I poured it into a jar and hid it in my closet. I wasn't sure what to do with the jar. Get it tested. How? I wasn't a detective. Just an old woman with a suspicion that felt heavier every day. But the cameras kept recording, and I kept watching. The footage from the kitchen showed nothing definitive. Just Claire's lingering hand. A shadow of intent. It wasn't enough. I needed something undeniable. Something that would make Daniel see her for what she was. Because if I was right, this wasn't just about me. It was about him, too. What kind of woman would do this to her husband's mother? What else was she capable of? I started to notice other things. The way Claire would touch Daniel's arm when she wanted something. Her voice soft but insistent. The way he'd look at her, like she was his whole world, but with a flicker of exhaustion in his eyes. She was wearing him down, just like she was wearing me down. I wanted to save him, to pull him out of her web. But I knew he wouldn't listen. Not without proof. Not without the truth laid bare. So I planned. I'd fake another illness. Worse than before. I'd make myself seem fragile. On the edge. I'd give Claire the perfect stage for her performance. And I'd make sure the cameras caught every moment. I spent days preparing. Practicing my cough. My weary sighs. I stopped eating in front of her. Claiming a weak stomach. To see if she'd push harder. She did. She started offering to cook more. Bringing me plates of food I'd politely refuse. Her frustration was subtle. But it was there a tightness in her smile. A sharpness in her voice. The night of my big illness came. I told Daniel I wasn't feeling well. My voice trembling just enough. He was worried. But Claire was quick to step in. Insisting she'd handle it. I let her. I lay in bed. The cameras rolling. My phone hidden under my pillow. I heard her moving downstairs. The clink of dishes. The soft hum of her voice. Then, the crash. Louder than usual. More dramatic. I waited. My breath shallow. Until Daniel's footsteps thundered down the stairs. I checked the camera feed. There she was. Collapsed on the kitchen floor. A broken plate beside her. But this time, I saw something new. Before she fell, she reached into her pocket, pulled out a small vial, and sprinkled something into my soup. My heart stopped. The truth wasn't just exploding, it was screaming. The vial was small, no bigger than a tube of lip balm. But in that grainy camera footage, it was everything. My hands shook as I rewatched the clip, pausing on the moment Claire's fingers twisted the cap, letting a few drops fall into the soup she'd been so insistent I eat. The soup I'd refused, claiming nausea. Her face didn't change as she did it, no guilt. No hesitation. Just a calm, practiced motion. Like she'd done it before. My chest tightened. A mix of fear and fury. This wasn't just about her fake collapses anymore. This was poison. This was betrayal. This was my son's wife trying to kill me. I saved the footage. Backed it up on a USB drive. And hid it in a locked box under my bed. I didn't know what was in that vial. But I knew I couldn't confront her yet. If I showed Daniel the video now, he might not believe it. He'd see his wife, the woman he loved, and his mind would scramble for excuses. I needed more. I needed to know what she was using, how long she'd been doing it, and why. Most of all, I needed to protect Daniel. Because if she was willing to hurt me, what would she do to him if he ever crossed her? I started researching. Late at night, when the house was quiet, I'd sit at my old desktop computer, fan whirring like my racing thoughts. I read about poisons that could mimic natural illnesses, arsenic, antifreeze, even prescription drugs in the wrong doses. I didn't know where to start, but I knew I had to be careful. If Claire suspected I was onto her, she'd cover her tracks. Or worse. I stopped drinking anything she offered, even water. I bought a mini fridge for my bedroom, stocked it with sealed bottles and snacks. I told her I was on a special diet, doctor's orders. She didn't question it. But I saw the flicker of annoyance in her eyes. I sent the jar of tea I'd saved to a private lab, paying with cash from my savings so there'd be no paper trail. The results took a week. And when they came, my worst fears were confirmed. Trace amounts of ethylene glycolantifreeze. Not enough to kill me outright, but enough to make me sick, to wear me down over time. The lab tech said it was unusual, suggested I contact the police. I thanked him but said I'd handle it. This wasn't just about justice anymore. It was personal. Claire had invaded my home, my family, my trust. I wanted to confront her, but I wanted her to feel the weight of her own lies first. I kept the cameras rolling, catching every move she made. The kitchen camera showed her slipping the vial into her purse after another collapse. The bedroom camera caught her rifling through my nightstand when she thought I was asleep. She was looking for something, me notebook, maybe, or the medications she thought I was still taking. I started leaving decoys, empty pill bottles, a fake journal with mundane entries. She took the bait, reading the journal when I was out of the room. It was chilling, watching her invade my privacy, but it fueled my resolve. Daniel was the hardest part. He was caught in the middle, blind to her games. I saw the toll it was taking on him, the way his shoulders slumped, the way he'd linger at my door, asking if I was okay but never staying long. Claire was always there, pulling him away with a touch or a whispered word. I wanted to tell him everything, but I couldn't. Not yet. If I showed him the footage too soon, he might confront her, and she'd twist it, make herself the victim. I had to wait until the truth was undeniable, until she couldn't talk her way out of it. I planned my next move carefully. I'd stage another illness, but this time, I'd push her to the edge. I'd make her think she was winning, that I was weaker than ever. I bought a bottle of antifreeze from a hardware store, diluted it with water, and kept it hidden in my closet. I wasn't going to use it. I wasn't like her, but I wanted her to think I'd caught her. I'd leave the bottle where she could find it. Let her panic. Let her wonder if I knew. It was risky, but I was done playing the victim. The day came. I told Daniel I was feeling faint, my heart racing. I let my voice waver, my hands tremble. Claire was quick to swoop in, her concern so convincing I almost doubted myself. She brought me tea, insisted I drink it. I pretended to sip, then spilled it on the rug, apologizing profusely. Her eyes narrowed, just for a moment, but she recovered fast. That night, I left the diluted antifreeze bottle in my bathroom cabinet, slightly ajar, as if I'd been careless. The camera was angled perfectly to catch her reaction. She found it the next morning. I watched the footage later, my breath held tight. Claire opened the cabinet, froze, and picked up the bottle. Her face went pale, her hands shaking as she turned it over, reading the label. She didn't put it back right away. She stood there, staring, as if weighing her options. Then she slipped it into her pocket and left the room. My heart sank. Part of me had hoped I was wrong, that she'd see the bottle and laugh it off, confused. But no. She took it. She knew what it meant. I wasn't ready to confront her yet, but I was close. I had the footage, the lab results, the bottle. I had enough to go to the police, but I didn't want it to end that way. Not yet. I wanted Claire to admit it, to face what she'd done. I wanted Daniel to hear it from her, not from a video or a stranger in uniform. I wanted redemption, not just for me, but for my son, for our family. So I waited, my heart heavy with the weight of what was coming. The truth was a bomb, and I was holding the detonator. The house felt like a pressure cooker, every moment charged with unspoken accusations. I kept up the charade of frailty, coughing weakly when Claire was near, letting my hands shake as I reached for a glass. She watched me like a hawk, her smiles tighter now, her eyes searching for cracks in my performance. I wondered if she suspected I was onto her. The missing antifreeze bottle had rattled her. I could see it in the way she moved, her usual grace replaced by a jittery edge. But she didn't confront me, and I didn't confront her. Not yet. The cameras kept rolling, and I kept gathering pieces of the puzzle she thought she'd hidden. Daniel was the one who broke the silence. One evening, as I sat in the living room pretending to read, he came in alone, his face drawn. "Mom," he said, sitting across from me. "Are you sure you're okay? You seem different." My heart ached. He was reaching out, sensing something was wrong, but I couldn't tell him yet. I smiled, patted his hand. "Just tired, sweetheart. Getting old isn't easy." He didn't push, but the worry in his eyes stayed with me. Claire appeared in the doorway, her presence like a cold draft. "Everything okay?" she asked, her voice syrupy. I nodded, and Daniel left with her, his hand in hers. I reviewed the footage that night. The kitchen camera had caught something new: Claire pouring my special tea into the sink when she thought no one was watching. She replaced it with plain water, her movements quick, almost frantic. It was confirmation she was tampering with my drinks. But it wasn't enough to prove poison. I needed her to slip, to say something incriminating, or to act in a way the cameras couldn't miss. I decided to up the stakes. I'd confront her indirectly, plant seeds of doubt, make her think I knew more than I was saying. The next morning, I left a note on the kitchen counter, written in shaky handwriting: "Claire, I found something odd in the bathroom cabinet. We need to talk." I made sure the cameras were on, then went to my room to wait. She found the note an hour later. I watched on my phone as her face drained of color. She crumpled the paper, glanced around, and stuffed it in her pocket. Then she paced, her fingers twisting together. For the first time, she looked scared. Not guilty, not yet, but scared. It was a start. She came to my room later, knocking softly. "Margaret, can I come in?" Her voice was gentle, but I heard the strain. I let her in, keeping my face neutral. "What's this about a note?" she asked, sitting on the edge of my bed. I coughed, playing up my weakness, and said, "I found a bottle, antifreeze, I think, in the bathroom. It's strange, don't you think?" Her eyes widened, just for a moment, before she laughed a brittle, forced sound. "Oh, that must be Daniel's. He was fixing the car last week. I'll tell him to be more careful." She was lying, and we both knew it. I didn't push further. I wanted her to stew, to wonder how much I knew. That night, I checked the cameras again. She'd gone back to the kitchen after our talk, her movements erratic. She opened the cabinet where she kept her purse, pulled out the vial, and stared at it for a long time. Then she poured it down the sink, rinsing it thoroughly. My heart sank. She was covering her tracks. But the cameras had caught it, and I had the earlier footage of her using it. It was something, but I needed more. I needed her to confess, or at least to act in a way that left no doubt. I decided to push harder. I told Daniel I was feeling worse, that I needed to see a specialist. I mentioned toxins in passing, watching Claire's reaction. She froze, her fork halfway to her mouth, then recovered with a concerned smile. Toxins. Margaret, you've been watching too many mysteries. Her laugh was too loud, too bright. Daniel didn't notice, but I did. I was getting under her skin. That night, I left another note, this time in her purse. I know what you did. Stop, or I'll tell Daniel. It was a risk, but I needed her to break. The cameras caught her finding the note the next morning. She read it in the bathroom, her hands trembling. She tore it into pieces, flushed them down the toilet, and stood there, breathing hard. Then she did something I didn't expect. She pulled out her phone and made a call, her voice low. It's me, she whispered. She knows something. I need to get out. My blood ran cold. Who was she talking to? Was there someone else involved? I hadn't considered that possibility, and it terrified me. I couldn't wait any longer. I needed to confront her, but I needed Daniel there. I needed him to see the truth, not just hear it from me. I planned it carefully. I'd invite them both to dinner, say it was to discuss my health. I play the footage on my laptop, let the cameras do the talking. But I had to be sure Claire wouldn't run. I started locking my bedroom door at night, keeping the USB drive with the footage on me at all times. I felt like a prisoner in my own home, but I was also the hunter, and Claire was my prey. The day of the dinner came. I cooked something simple to avoid any tampering. Claire was quiet, her eyes darting to me every few minutes. Daniel was distracted, checking his phone, oblivious to the tension. I set up my laptop in the dining room, the footage ready to play. My heart pounded as I waited for the right moment. I didn't want to destroy my son, but I had to save him. I had to save us all. As we sat down to eat, I took a deep breath and said, "There's something you both need to see." The truth was about to explode, and I was ready to light the fuse. The dining room was heavy with silence as I opened my laptop. Daniel looked confused. His fork paused over his plate. Claire's face was a mask of calm, but her hands were clenched in her lap, knuckles white. I'd rehearsed this moment in my head 100 times. But now, with their eyes on me, my resolve wavered. What if Daniel didn't believe me? What if he chose her over me? I pushed the thought away. This wasn't about me winning. It was about the truth. I clicked play, and the footage filled the screen. Claire's collapse in the kitchen, her glance at the empty room, the smirk she thought no one saw. Daniel frowned, leaning closer. "What is this, Mom?" he asked, his voice uncertain. Claire's eyes were locked on the screen, her breath shallow. I didn't answer, letting the footage speak. The next clip played the vial, the drops in my soup, her careful movements. Daniel's face went pale. Claire. He whispered, turning to her. She didn't move, didn't speak. Her eyes flicked to me, and for the first time, I saw fear. Real fear. I paused the video, letting the image of her with the vial hang in the air. There's more, I said, my voice steady. But I think you know what this means. Claire laughed. A sharp, desperate sound. This is ridiculous. Margaret. You're sick. You're confused. That's not what you think it is. But her voice cracked, and Daniel's eyes stayed on her, searching. Then what is it? He asked, his tone harder now. She faltered, her hands twisting. It's just medicine. For my nerves. I didn't want you to worry. It was a weak lie, and we all knew it. I pulled out the lab report, sliding it across the table. Ethylene glycol, I said. Antifreeze. In my tea. Daniel's hand shook as he picked up the paper, his eyes scanning the words. Daniel. She's lying, Claire said, her voice rising. She's trying to tear us apart. But he wasn't looking at her anymore. He was looking at me, his face a mix of shock and pain. Mom, how long have you known? He asked. I swallowed hard. Long enough to be sure. I didn't want to believe it either. Claire stood, her chair scraping against the floor. This is insane. I'm not staying for this. She moved toward the door, but Daniel grabbed her arm. Sit down, he said, his voice low. Dangerous. She froze, then sank back into her chair, her eyes darting like a trapped animal. I played the rest of the footage, her rifling through my nightstand, pouring out my tea, finding the antifreeze bottle. Each clip was a nail in her coffin, and she knew it. Daniel's face grew darker with every second. When the screen went black, he turned to her. Why? He asked, his voice breaking. Claire's mouth opened, but no words came. She looked at me, and I saw it then, the hatred she'd hidden so well. You were always in the way. She spat, her voice venomous. Always clinging to him, making me the bad guy. I just wanted you gone. The room felt like it was collapsing. Daniel's hands clenched into fists, his breath ragged. You tried to kill my mother, he said, each word a wound. Claire's face crumpled, and for a moment, I thought she might cry. But then she straightened, her eyes cold. I didn't want to kill her. Just keep her out of our lives. You were mine, Daniel, not hers. I felt sick, not just for myself, but for him. For the love he'd given her, the trust she'd shattered. Daniel stood, his chair falling backward. Get out, he said, his voice barely a whisper. Claire blinked, as if she hadn't heard. What? She said. Get out of this house. Now. She stared at him, then at me, her mouth twisting. You're choosing her over me? She asked, her voice rising to a shriek. Daniel didn't answer. He didn't need to. His silence was louder than any words. Claire grabbed her purse and stormed out, the front door slamming behind her. The house felt empty, hollow, but the truth was finally free. I thought that would be the end, but it wasn't. Daniel sank into his chair, his head in his hands. How did I not see it? He whispered. I reached for him, my hand on his shoulder. You loved her, I said. Love blinds us. He looked up, his eyes wet. I'm so sorry, Mom. I failed you. I shook my head, tears burning my own eyes. You didn't fail me. You're here now. We sat there, the weight of her betrayal heavy between us. But so was the bond we'd almost lost. I thought about calling the police, but I hesitated. The footage, the lab report, it was enough to press charges. But what would that do to Daniel? He was already broken. His world turned upside down. I wanted justice, but I wanted healing more. For him. For us. I told him about the cameras, the notes, the antifreeze bottle. He listened, his face grim, but he didn't push for punishment. She's gone, he said finally. That's enough for now. I wasn't sure it was, but I let it go. For him. That night, I lay awake, the house too quiet without Claire's presence. I thought about her words, her hatred. I thought about Daniel, the pain in his eyes. And I thought about myself, the woman I'd become, suspicious, cunning, relentless. I didn't regret it. I'd done what I had to protect my family. But I wondered if I'd lost something along the way. Some piece of the woman who'd trusted too easily, loved too openly. The truth had exploded. Yes. But it had left scars. And I wasn't sure they'd ever heal. The days after Claire left were like walking through fog. Daniel moved through the house like a ghost. His eyes distant. His words few. I wanted to comfort him, but I didn't know how. Every time I looked at him, I saw the boy who used to run to me with scraped knees, trusting me to fix everything. Now, he was a man carrying a wound I couldn't heal. I kept the cameras on, not because I thought Claire would come back, but because I couldn't shake the habit of watching, of waiting for the next betrayal. Trust, once broken, doesn't mend easily. I spent hours replaying the footage, not to gather evidence anymore, but to understand. Why had she done it? What had turned her love for Daniel into something so twisted? I found no answers in her calculated glances, her careful movements. The vial was gone, her purse emptied, her presence erased from our home. But her shadow lingered. Daniel noticed it too. One morning, he found me at my computer, staring at the frozen image of Claire's smirk. Mom, he said softly, you need to stop. She's gone. I nodded, but I didn't close the laptop. Not yet. I decided to clean the house, to scrub away her memory. I started in the kitchen, throwing out the tea she'd favored, the spices she'd used. I found a small bottle tucked behind the flour canister, unmarked, half empty. My heart raced as I held it, but I didn't open it. I didn't need to. I knew what it was, or at least what it might be. I wrapped it in a plastic bag and locked it in my safe, next to the USB drive. Evidence, I told myself, in case we needed it. But deep down, I knew it was more than that. It was a reminder of what I'd survived. Daniel started talking more, slowly. One night, over coffee, He told me about Claire's past things she'd shared in moments of vulnerability. A childhood marked by neglect. A mother who'd favored her siblings. A desperate need for attention. I thought I could be enough for her, he said, his voice raw. I thought my love would fix her. I reached for his hand, squeezing it. You can't fix someone who doesn't want to be fixed, I said. He nodded, but the pain in his eyes didn't fade. I wondered if it ever would. I started seeing a therapist. Someone to help me process the betrayal. The fear. The anger. She asked me what I wanted. Now that Claire was gone. I didn't know at first. Justice. Revenge. Peace. The more we talked, the more I realized what I wanted most was redemption, not just for me, but for Daniel. I wanted us to rebuild. To find the family we'd been before Claire's poison seeped into our lives. But redemption, I learned, isn't a moment. It's a process. Slow and painful. Built on honesty and time. I showed Daniel the footage again. Not to hurt him, but to help him understand. We watched it together, frame by frame, pausing on the moments that broke his heart. He cried. Something I hadn't seen since he was a child. I should have seen it, he said. His voice choked. I should have protected you. I held him, my own tears falling. You didn't know, I said. But you know now. And we're still here. That was the first step, acknowledging the truth. Not just Claire's, but ours. The ways we'd failed each other. The ways we could heal. We started small. We cooked together. Simple meals like we used to when he was young. We talked about his work, his dreams, the things Claire had overshadowed. I told him stories about his father, about the early days of our marriage, the mistakes we'd made and overcome. He listened, and slowly, the distance between us shrank. The cameras stayed on, but I checked them less. The house felt warmer, less like a battlefield. I started to believe we could move forward, that the scars might fade, even if they never disappeared. But Claire wasn't done with us. A week later, I found a letter in the mailbox. No return address. Her handwriting, sharp and precise, filled the page. You think you've won, it read. But you don't know everything. Watch your back. My stomach dropped. I showed it to Daniel, expecting him to dismiss it, but his face hardened. She's bluffing, he said, but his voice lacked conviction. I wasn't so sure. The letter felt like a threat, a reminder that her poison wasn't just in vials, it was in her words, her intent, her refusal to let go. I went back to the cameras, checking old footage for anything I'd missed. I found a clip I hadn't noticed before, from the night she'd called someone in the bathroom. Her voice was clearer than I'd realized. She's getting too close. I need your help. My blood ran cold. Who was she talking to? Partner. A friend. Someone worse. I didn't know. But I knew we weren't safe yet. I told Daniel we needed to go to the police. Not just for me, but for him. For us. He hesitated, then nodded. You're right, he said. No more hiding. We met with a detective the next day. A kind woman with sharp eyes. I showed her the footage, the lab report, the bottle, the letter. She listened, took notes, and promised to investigate. "This is serious," she said. "But you did the right thing." I felt a weight lift. Not completely, but enough to breathe. Daniel held my hand as we left the station, his grip firm. "We'll get through this," he said. I believed him, not because it was certain, but because we were together. The truth had exploded, but it hadn't destroyed us. It had set us free. The police investigation moved slowly, each day stretching into the next with no word from the detective. I tried to keep busy, tending to the garden I'd neglected, sorting through old photos of Daniel as a boy. But Claire's letter haunted me, its words looping in my mind. "You don't know everything." What didn't I know? Was there more to her plan? More people involved? The uncertainty gnawed at me, and I saw it in Daniel too. He checked the locks at night, glance over his shoulder when we left the house. We were free of Claire, but not of her shadow. I kept the cameras on, more out of habit than necessity. I catch myself watching the live feed, expecting to see her slip back into our lives. One night, I found Daniel doing the same, his face lit by the glow of my laptop. "You don't trust her either," I said, sitting beside him. He didn't look at me, just nodded. "I keep thinking about what she said on that call," he admitted. Who was she talking to? What if she comes back? I didn't have answers, but I squeezed his shoulder. "We'll face it together," I said. It was all I could offer. The detective called a week later. They'd traced the letter to a post office near Claire's old apartment. But she'd vanished. No forwarding address. No trace on her credit cards. "She's good at covering her tracks," the detective said. "But we're looking." She asked if we'd noticed anything else suspicious, and I mentioned the phone call from the footage. She promised to dig into Claire's call history, but warned it could take time. I thanked her, my stomach twisting. Time felt like a luxury we didn't have. Daniel and I started rebuilding, piece by piece. We went to therapy together, a family session where we laid bare our guilt, our fears. He talked about how he'd missed the signs, how he'd let Claire's charm blind him. I talked about my anger, my distrust, how I'd become someone I barely recognized. The therapist listened, guiding us toward forgiveness not just for each other, but for ourselves. It wasn't easy. Some days, I catch Daniel staring out the window, lost in thought, and I'd wonder if he was mourning the woman he'd loved or the life he'd thought they'd have. I decided to confront my own demons. I wrote Claire a letter, not to send, but to release. I poured out my anger, my hurt, my confusion. I asked the questions I'd never get answers to. Why me? Why Daniel? What had broken her so badly she'd hurt us to feel whole? I burned the letter in the backyard, watching the flames curl around her name. It didn't erase the pain, but it lightened it, just a little. I told Daniel about it, and he smiled, the first real smile I'd seen in weeks. "You're stronger than I am, Mom," he said. I shook my head. "We're strong together." The cameras caught something odd a few nights later. A shadow moving outside, near the garage. It was brief, barely a flicker, but it set my nerves on edge. I showed Daniel, and he insisted we check it out. We went outside, flashlights in hand. but found no footprints. No signs of tampering. Still, it rattled us. We upgraded the security system, added motion lights, a deadbolt. I hated living like this, but I hated the thought of Claire winning more. She'd taken enough. The detective called again, this time with news. They'd found a name in Claire's phone records, a man named Paul, an old boyfriend with a history of petty crime. They hadn't located him yet, but the call I'd overheard matched his number. We think she might have been working with him, the detective said. Maybe to scare you, maybe worse. My heart sank. I'd hoped Claire was acting alone, that her poison was hers alone. But this was bigger, uglier. I told Daniel, and his face hardened. If she comes near us, I'll handle it, he said. I believed him. We started talking about the future, something we hadn't done since Claire. Daniel wanted to sell the house, start fresh somewhere new. I hesitated. This was my home, filled with memories of his father, his childhood. But I saw the hope in his eyes, the need to escape the weight of what had happened. Let's think about it, I said, and he nodded, grateful. We spent evenings looking at listings, imagining a life untainted by her. Felt like a dream, but a good one worth chasing. I kept the USB drive close, the footage a reminder of what we'd survived. I didn't watch it anymore, but I couldn't bring myself to delete it. It was proof, not just of Claire's betrayal, but of my strength, my fight. I set her up, exposed her, saved us. But I also knew redemption wasn't just about winning. It was about living, moving forward, choosing love over fear. Daniel and I were doing that, slowly, together. The scars were there, but so was the healing. One night, as we sat on the porch, Daniel looked at me, his eyes clear for the first time in months. I'm proud of you, Mom, he said. For fighting. For us. Tears stung my eyes, but I smiled. I'm proud of us, I said. The stars were bright above us, the air cool and clean. Claire was out there, somewhere, but she wasn't here. Not anymore. The truth had exploded, and we were still standing, stronger than before. The fight wasn't over, but for now, we had each other, and that was enough. Months passed, and the house began to feel like ours again. The new security system hummed quietly, the motion lights casting soft glows across the yard. Daniel and I settled into a rhythm breakfast together. Long talks over coffee, laughter that came easier with each day. The scars of Claire's betrayal lingered, but they were fading, like bruises that ache less with time. We hadn't heard from the police in weeks, and part of me hoped Claire had disappeared for good. But another part, the part that had learned to distrust, knew better. Evil doesn't vanish so easily. I dismantled the cameras, one by one, storing them in a box in the attic. I didn't need them anymore. The footage was safe, locked away, a safeguard against a future I hoped would never come. Daniel helped me, his hands steady as he coiled the wires. Feels like we're closing a chapter, he said, and I nodded. A bad one, I replied. We smiled, but there was a weight to it, an acknowledgement of what we'd lost and what we'd gained. Trust. rebuilt slowly, was stronger than before. We decided to sell the house. It wasn't just about escaping Claire's shadow. It was about starting fresh, building a life that was ours alone. We found a small place by the coast, a cottage with a view of the ocean. Daniel's eyes lit up when we toured it, talking about morning walks on the beach, a garden we could tend together. I could see him healing, piece by piece, and it filled me with a quiet joy. We packed up the old house, sorting through memories, keeping what mattered. The antifreeze bottle, the USB drive, they stayed in the safe, just in case. The detective called one last time, a month before we moved. They'd found Paul, Claire's old boyfriend, in a rundown apartment 2 states away. He talked, spilling details of her plan, not just to make me sick, but to drive a wedge between Daniel and me, to secure his inheritance for herself. She'd promised Paul a cut, but he swore he'd backed out when things got too real. Claire, he said, was gone. No trace. She's smart, the detective warned. Stay vigilant. I thanked her, my heart heavy but not surprised. Claire was a ghost now, but ghosts have a way of haunting. Moving day came, and with it, a sense of release. Daniel and I loaded the last boxes into the truck, the old house empty behind us. I took one last walk through, my footsteps echoing. The kitchen, where Claire had poured her poison. The living room, where she'd staged her collapses. The bedroom, where I'd lain awake, planning my trap. It was just a house now, walls and floors, stripped of her presence. I locked the door and didn't look back. The cottage was waiting. A new chapter. Clean page. We settled into the cottage. The sound of waves a constant comfort. Daniel found work at a local firm, his confidence returning. I started painting again, something I hadn't done since his father died. My canvases filled with blues and greens, the colors of the sea, of hope. We had neighbors, kind people who invited us for dinner, who didn't know our story. Felt good to be Margaret again, not the woman who'd fought a war in her own home. But I never forgot her. Couldn't. One evening, as I sat on the porch watching the sunset, Daniel joined me, a letter in his hand. No return address, just like before. My stomach twisted as he opened it. Claire's handwriting, sharp and familiar. You think you're free. It read. But I'm not done. You took everything from me. I'll take it back. Daniel's face was grim, but not afraid. She's trying to scare us, he said, tossing the letter into the fire pit. We watched it burn, the flames eating her words. Let her try, I said, my voice steady. We weren't the same people she'd betrayed. The police were notified, but there was little they could do. Claire was a shadow, slipping through the cracks. Daniel and I made a pact. No more fear. We'd live our lives, not hers. We installed cameras at the cottage. Just a few, for peace of mind. But we didn't check them obsessively. We didn't let her control us. Instead, we filled our days with small joys, walks on the beach, shared meals, stories of the future. Redemption wasn't a moment. I'd learned. It was every moment we chose to keep going. Years later, I think back to that time, to the woman I'd become to protect my son. The anger, the cunning, the traps, they were part of me, but not all of me. I'd fought for justice, for truth, and I'd won. But the real victory was here, in this cottage, with Daniel's laughter filling the air, with paint on my hands and the ocean in my view. Claire had tried to break us, but she'd only made us stronger. Her poison had failed, not because I'd caught her, but because we'd chosen love over hate, trust over fear. As I write this, the sun is setting, casting gold across the water. Daniel is inside, cooking dinner, humming a tune his father used to love. The cameras are off, the safe locked, the past where it belongs. Claire is out there, somewhere, but she's not here. Not in our home, not in our hearts. The truth exploded. Yes, but it didn't destroy us. It rebuilt us, piece by piece, into something new, something whole. And as I watch the waves, I know we've won, not just against her, but for ourselves, for the family we are, and always will be.